Open the door." Nobody moved. Claire Dawson stood frozen beside the polished conference table, one trembling hand shielding the bruise blooming across her cheek, while the other gripped a folder so tightly the edges bent beneath her fingers. Her split lips stung each time she tried to breathe. Someone near the back whispered, "She said she fell." No one believed it. Then the conference room door opened. Silence swept through the boardroom. Vincent Romano entered without hurry, his unreadable gaze passing over the frightened executives before stopping on Claire. He took one slow step toward her, his voice low enough that everyone leaned in to hear. "Did he hurt you?" Claire lowered her eyes. She couldn't answer. Instead, tears slipped silently down her face, and everyone in the room suddenly understood that Vincent Romano no longer needed an explanation. No one dared to speak. The quarterly strategy meeting had begun only minutes earlier, yet the atmosphere inside the boardroom had transformed from routine corporate tension into something far heavier. Executives who negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking now avoided looking in Vincent Romano's direction. Claire quickly wiped her tears, drawing in a careful breath before forcing the familiar professional smile she had perfected over the years. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I slipped on the apartment stairs this morning. I didn't want to delay the meeting." Her voice was steady. Almost convincing. Almost. Vincent studied her without interrupting. He had watched Claire handle impossible deadlines, demanding investors, and impossible personalities for nearly 3 years. She never arrived late. She never forgot a document. She never offered excuses. Today she had done all three. That alone told him something was wrong. "Meeting adjourned," he said calmly. The room froze again. Several board members exchanged startled glances. The quarterly meeting had been scheduled for months. International investors were waiting online. Financial projections remained unfinished. No one had ever heard Vincent cancel a board meeting after it had begun. Yet no one questioned him. "Leave your reports," he continued. "We'll reconvene tomorrow." Within seconds, chairs slid backward, laptops closed. The directors quietly filed out, each sensing that whatever had just happened mattered far more than corporate profits. When the last executive disappeared, only Claire remained. She hurried to gather scattered folders. "You really didn't have to cancel everything," she murmured. "I'm perfectly capable of—" "You aren't." His interruption wasn't harsh. It was simply true. Claire stopped moving. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was careful. Vincent finally stepped closer, though he still left enough distance to respect the invisible wall Claire always kept around herself. "If you don't want to tell me," he said quietly, "I won't force you." She nodded without looking up. "Thank you, but I won't ignore what I can see." Her fingers tightened around the folder. "I really did fall." He noticed how quickly she answered. Too quickly. Almost rehearsed. Vincent reached for the intercom on the conference table. "Security." The response came immediately. "Yes, Mr. Romano. I need every camera recording from the front entrance between 7:30 and 8:30 this morning." "Right away, sir." Claire's head lifted in surprise. "That's unnecessary." "Is it?" She opened her mouth before closing it again. For the first time since he had hired her, Vincent watched uncertainty replace the quiet confidence that usually defined her. An hour later, the security footage played inside his private office. The recording showed Claire approaching the building. She wasn't late because of traffic. She wasn't distracted. She stopped, just outside the entrance. She hesitated. Then a man stepped into the frame. Even without audio, Vincent recognized confrontation. The stranger leaned toward Claire. She took one step backward. He stepped closer. Claire never looked at him. She stared at the ground. After nearly a minute, the man finally walked away. Only then did Claire enter the building, straighten her jacket, wipe her eyes, and force herself to smile before greeting the receptionist exactly as she did every morning. Vincent paused the video on the frame where Claire stood alone outside the entrance, her shoulders visibly shaking before she walked inside, as if nothing had happened. For the first time in years, the calm expression on Vincent Romano's face became almost impossible to read. Claire spent the rest of the morning pretending nothing had happened. It was a skill she had mastered years ago. By noon, the board meeting had already been rescheduled. Every executive received updated calendars before anyone had time to ask questions. Revised reports appeared in their inboxes. Conference rooms were rebooked. International calls were rearranged across 3 time zones. Only Claire could untangle chaos that efficiently. She focused on the familiar rhythm of work, because work had always been the safest place to hide. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. "Come in." Vincent stepped inside without the stack of documents he usually carried. Instead, he held 2 cups of coffee. "I guessed your usual order." Claire blinked. "You remembered? You've ordered the same drink for 3 years." She accepted the cup with a small smile. "Thank you." For a moment, neither of them mentioned the bruise, still faintly visible beneath her makeup. Vincent sat across from her desk, instead of behind it. The man outside. Claire's smile disappeared. "You know about him. I saw the security footage." She stared at the coffee in her hands. Several quiet seconds passed before she finally spoke. "His name is Ethan. Nothing else." Vincent waited. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than questions. Claire slowly exhaled. "We were engaged." Another pause. "I ended it almost a year ago." She forced a weak laugh that carried no amusement. He couldn't understand why. Vincent remained still. "He always said he was trying to help me improve myself." She looked down at her hands. "He'd buy clothes that were 2 sizes too small and tell me they were motivation." Another bitter smile. "He counted calories I never asked him to count." He'd apologize after every cruel comment, and then he'd say something worse the next day. Her voice remained calm, but every sentence sounded practiced, as though she had repeated the memories often enough that they no longer belonged to her. "He used to tell me that successful men wanted beautiful women." She swallowed carefully. "And women who looked like me should be grateful whenever someone chose them." Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Claire continued before he could speak. "When I finally left, he laughed." She looked toward the office window overlooking downtown Chicago. "He said I'd come back, because no one else would ever love a plus-size woman." The words settled heavily between them. "I haven't." She smiled sadly. "So now he waits outside my apartment sometimes, or outside work. He says he's giving me another chance. And when I refuse," she touched the fading bruise without realizing it, "he gets angry." Vincent's voice remained quiet. "Has he ever threatened you?" Claire hesitated. "He doesn't have to." Before either of them could continue, her computer chimed. She glanced at the screen. "Oh." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You forgot." "I rarely forget." "You have lunch with the Zurich investors in 14 minutes. A faint crease appeared between Vincent's brows. "I moved that meeting." Claire smiled for the first time all day. "No, you moved the internal briefing." She rotated her monitor toward him. "The Zurich lunch stayed exactly where I left it." Vincent looked at the calendar. She was right. Again. "I already sent the updated presentation to your tablet," Claire added. "The interpreter will meet you in the executive dining room instead of Conference Hall B, because the audio system there is still being repaired." Vincent almost smiled. "You've just admitted you're still working. I never claimed otherwise. You should be resting. And who would keep your schedule from collapsing?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I suppose you've become impossible to replace." Claire laughed softly. "I've been telling human resources that for years." Her humor faded as quickly as it appeared. As Vincent stood to leave, he paused beside her desk. "I'll be working late tonight." Claire nodded. "I know." "You don't. I moved your evening calls to tomorrow." He looked genuinely surprised. "I assumed you'd want to leave before the storm arrives." Vincent glanced through the window. Dark clouds were gathering over Chicago. He hadn't even checked the weather. Claire already had. As he walked toward the door, he made one silent decision. Beginning tonight, Claire Dawson would never leave the office alone again. The decision was made before Vincent left the building that evening. No discussion, no announcement. Just one quiet phone call placed from his private office after Claire had become absorbed in reorganizing next week's executive schedule. A man answered on the second ring. "Boss, I need someone watching an employee." The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat. Observation? Protection. Understood. No contact. No interference. No reports to her. If she's unaware you're there, you're doing it correctly. The man on the other end needed nothing more. "I'll assign our best people." Vincent's expression remained unreadable. They are protecting a woman, not following a target. She comes first. The call ended. Outside Romano Global, several members of Vincent's private security network quietly adjusted their assignments. Officially, they belonged to different corporate security contractors. Unofficially, every one of them answered only to Vincent Romano. Claire noticed none of it. The following morning, she arrived exactly 8 minutes before her usual time. The receptionist greeted her with a cheerful smile. "Good morning, Claire." "Morning, Linda." Everything seemed ordinary. She never saw the security specialist sitting in a parked sedan across the street, pretending to read a newspaper while confirming Ethan Brooks wasn't nearby. Nor did she notice another guard entering the cafe she visited every Tuesday, ordering coffee he had no intention of drinking until she safely left for the office. To Claire, nothing had changed. Inside the company, however, small differences slowly began appearing. Vincent emerged from his office shortly before noon and stopped beside Claire's desk. "You skipped breakfast." She looked up in surprise. "I did. How did you know?" He nodded toward the untouched yogurt and banana sitting inside her tote bag. "You packed it. You never ate it." Claire followed his gaze before laughing quietly. "I forgot. You forget meals too often." She smiled sheepishly. "And you forget meetings. I have you. I suppose that's true." He placed a small paper bag on her desk. "Eat." She opened it. Her favorite turkey sandwich from the little bakery 2 blocks away. You remembered that too. You order it every Wednesday. Claire stared at the lunch before shaking her head in amused disbelief. "I suddenly feel very predictable." Vincent's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Reliable. The distinction made her unexpectedly happy. Throughout the week, similar moments continued. He asked whether she had slept well after noticing the faint shadows beneath her eyes. He postponed a late-night strategy session because she looked exhausted, claiming he needed more time to review the reports himself. When an elevator malfunction forced everyone to use the stairs, he quietly carried the heavy archive boxes before Claire could lift them. Each gesture seemed insignificant on its own. Together, they became impossible for others to ignore. By Friday afternoon, whispers had begun circulating through the executive floor. "I've never seen Mr. Romano ask anyone if they'd eaten." He actually waited for Claire before entering the meeting. "Did you notice he drinks coffee only after she has hers now?" The observations spread with cautious curiosity rather than gossip. Everyone respected Claire. No one dared mock her in Vincent's presence. Still, they couldn't help noticing the change. Claire noticed something entirely different. Security personnel appeared more frequently throughout the building. An additional guard stood near the underground parking garage. 2 officers now monitored the employee entrance each evening. She mentioned it while reviewing contracts with Vincent. "The company has certainly increased security." It has. Did something happen? Routine precautions. She accepted the explanation immediately. That's probably wise. Vincent watched her return to her paperwork, without another question. She never imagined those precautions had nothing to do with company policy. Every route she traveled home had already been quietly mapped. Every unusual vehicle near her apartment was being recorded. Every appearance Ethan Brooks made was documented without his knowledge. Vincent had no interest in controlling Claire's life. He simply intended to ensure that fear would never again be waiting for her outside another door. As dusk settled over Chicago, one of the security specialists transmitted a brief message. Subject has appeared near Ms. Dawson's apartment again. Vincent read the notification once. His expression did not change. But for the first time in many years, someone had unknowingly crossed a line that Vincent Romano did not permit anyone to cross. The annual Romano Global Charity Gala was the company's most anticipated event. Unlike board meetings or investor conferences, this evening celebrated the people behind the business. Executives mingled with non-profit leaders, journalists and longtime partners beneath crystal chandeliers, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Claire had coordinated every detail, every seating arrangement, every speech, every donation pledge. Every guest had received exactly the welcome she had planned. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe the evening might pass peacefully. She wore a deep emerald evening gown that complemented her graceful curves instead of hiding them. The dress was elegant rather than extravagant, and although she still felt self-conscious, several guests complimented her professionalism before they ever mentioned her appearance. Vincent noticed the difference. Not because of the dress, because Claire smiled more often than she had in days. Across the ballroom, Margaret Romano watched the two of them with quiet amusement. She approached Claire during a brief pause between introductions. "You look beautiful tonight, dear." Claire's cheeks warmed. "Thank you, Mrs. Romano." Margaret smiled knowingly. "My son has looked toward the entrance 6 times since this event began." Claire laughed politely. "He's probably checking whether the next guests have arrived." "If that explanation makes you feel better," Margaret replied gently, "you may keep believing it." Before Claire could respond, another guest requested her assistance. She excused herself with a grateful smile. The evening continued smoothly, until the ballroom doors opened once more. A familiar voice shattered the comfortable atmosphere. "There you are." Claire froze. Every ounce of color drained from her face before she even turned around. Ethan Brooks strode confidently across the ballroom, dressed in an expensive suit and wearing the charming smile that had once fooled everyone, including her. Several conversations faded into uneasy silence. "Claire," he said, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "I've been trying to reach you for weeks." She took a slow breath. "This isn't the place." "No?" His smile sharpened. "I thought this was exactly the place." He looked around the elegant ballroom. "So this is how you did it." Claire remained silent. "You found yourself another rich man." Several investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Journalists instinctively lowered their voices but kept watching. Ethan laughed. "I always wondered how an executive secretary could climb this fast." His gaze swept toward Vincent, who was speaking with international donors across the room. "I guess the answer isn't talent." The words landed like a slap. Claire's shoulders stiffened. "I won't discuss this with you." She turned to leave. Ethan stepped in front of her. "Oh, come on. You always run away when someone tells the truth." His voice grew louder. "Tell them. Tell them how you flirt with wealthy executives. Tell them how desperate you were for someone successful to notice you." Claire's breathing became uneven. Old memories pressed against her chest like heavy stones. The cruel comments, the endless criticism, the years spent believing she would never be enough. She tried to walk around him, Instead, Ethan reached out and seized her wrist. Not violently, but firmly enough to stop her. The crystal glasses stopped clinking. The quartet stopped playing. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. The entire ballroom watched in complete silence. Claire quietly whispered, "Please let go." Ethan leaned closer. "You owe me a conversation." She tried to pull her hand free. He tightened his grip. For one endless second, no one moved. Then another hand calmly closed around Ethan's wrist, not with anger, not with force, only with absolute certainty. Vincent Romano had arrived. Without raising his voice, without showing the slightest trace of emotion, he gently removed Ethan's hand from Claire's wrist. The silence inside the ballroom became almost unbearable, because everyone suddenly realized the most powerful man in the room had just stepped between Claire Dawson and the only person she had ever truly feared. Vincent never tightened his grip. He simply rested his hand around Ethan Brooks's wrist with calm, effortless control. The difference in strength became obvious almost immediately. Ethan tried to pull away. He couldn't. Not because Vincent was forcing him, because Vincent wasn't moving at all. His composure was somehow more intimidating than anger could have been. The ballroom remained perfectly silent. Business leaders who had negotiated with Vincent for years recognized the expression on his face. It wasn't rage. It was disappointment. And somehow, that was far more unsettling. Vincent slowly released Ethan's wrist. "Step away from her." The words were quiet, measured. There was no need to raise his voice. Ethan rubbed his wrist, forcing a laugh. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" A few nervous guests looked away. Everyone in Chicago's business world knew exactly who Vincent Romano was. But Ethan only saw a billionaire CEO. He had no idea how many people in the room instinctively held their breath whenever Vincent's expression became unreadable. Vincent answered without emotion. "I'm the man standing between you and the woman who asked you to let go." Ethan scoffed. "This is between me and Claire." Vincent turned his head slightly toward Claire. "Is that true?" Claire's eyes were still wet, but her voice no longer trembled. "No." It was a single word. "Soft. Certain." Vincent looked back at Ethan. "She told you no." A pause. "You should have listened." For the first time that evening, Ethan's confidence faltered. "You don't understand. We were engaged. We have history." Vincent nodded once. "So does every victim of emotional abuse." The sentence landed with devastating precision. Several executives lowered their eyes. They remembered the offhand jokes they had heard over the years, the comments about Claire's appearance, the assumptions that she had succeeded only because she was agreeable. They had never joined in, but they had never stopped it either. The weight of their silence suddenly felt unbearable. Ethan forced another smile. "You actually believe she's special?" Vincent answered immediately. "I know she is." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. He took one small step closer. "Claire Dawson has organized this company for nearly 3 years. When investors panicked, she stabilized the schedules. When acquisitions nearly collapsed, she found solutions before most executives recognized there was a problem. When I traveled across 3 continents, she kept this company running with remarkable precision." He looked around the ballroom. "Many of you have praised Romano Global for its efficiency." His gaze swept across board members, investors, and department heads. "You were praising her." A ripple of realization spread through the crowd. Vincent continued. "Every position she has ever held here, she earned." His voice remained calm. "So let me correct something publicly." He turned toward the master of ceremonies, who stood frozen beside the stage. The announcement was scheduled for next week. It will happen tonight. The audience exchanged confused glances. The master of ceremonies handed Vincent the microphone without hesitation. Vincent faced the room. Effective immediately. Claire Dawson is promoted to Chief Executive Coordinator of Romano Global. A collective gasp echoed through the ballroom. Claire stared at him in complete disbelief. Vincent continued before anyone could react. This promotion reflects years of extraordinary work. It is not a favor. It is not sympathy. It is long overdue. Then he looked directly at Claire. So that no one misunderstands. You earned every position in this company. Long before anyone even knew my name. For a heartbeat, the ballroom remained silent. Then someone began clapping. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the room erupted into sustained applause. Not polite applause. Grateful applause. Several executives rose to their feet. Others followed. The standing ovations spread across the ballroom until nearly every guest was applauding. Claire pressed one trembling hand against her mouth. She had spent years believing that people only noticed her mistakes. Now hundreds of people were recognizing her achievements. Across the room, Margaret Romano quietly wiped away a tear. "I told you," she whispered to herself. "You'd see her eventually." Ethan looked around in disbelief. The attention he had hoped to steal had transformed into something entirely different. He had become invisible. Two security officers approached him with practiced professionalism. "Sir, I think it's time to leave. I didn't do anything." One guard answered politely, "You've made the lady uncomfortable." "That's enough." Ethan looked toward Claire one last time. She wasn't looking at him anymore. For the first time since they had met years ago. She wasn't afraid of losing him. She wasn't trying to convince him to understand. She simply stood beside people who already did. As security escorted Ethan toward the exit, Vincent quietly turned to Claire. "You don't have to say anything tonight." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You've spent too many years explaining yourself to someone who never intended to listen." Claire looked into his eyes. For the first time in a very long time, silence no longer felt like surrender. It felt like safety. The applause eventually faded. Guests returned to their conversations, though the atmosphere inside the ballroom had changed completely. People no longer looked at Claire with polite curiosity. They greeted her with genuine respect. For the first time in years, she wasn't the woman quietly standing beside the CEO. She was the woman everyone finally understood had helped build the company. Even so, the attention felt overwhelming. After thanking a dozen well-wishers and accepting more congratulations than she knew how to answer, Claire slipped onto the balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. The cool evening air steadied her breathing. She rested both hands on the stone railing. Below, city lights shimmered like scattered stars. For a few peaceful minutes, no one interrupted her. Then she heard familiar footsteps. "You always find the quietest place." She smiled without turning around. "And somehow, you always find me." Vincent stepped beside her, leaving enough space that she never felt crowded. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence between them had become something entirely different now. Not awkward, not uncertain. Comfortable. Claire laughed softly. "I should probably be inside thanking everyone. They'll understand. I've never liked being the center of attention." I noticed. She looked down at the lights below. "I spent so many years trying to become invisible." Vincent didn't answer. He simply listened. "My parents always told me confidence came from within." She smiled faintly. I believed them. Then Ethan spent years convincing me that confidence depended on a number, on a scale. Her fingers tightened around the balcony railing. I stopped buying clothes I liked. I stopped taking photographs. I stopped believing compliments. She shook her head gently. It wasn't because I thought he was right. I just heard his voice so often that eventually it became my own. Vincent turned toward her. "I've seen that happen before." Claire looked at him. "You have?" I've seen people surrender pieces of themselves, one criticism at a time. He paused. The tragedy isn't that someone lies to them. It's that eventually they repeat the lie without realizing it. Claire felt tears gathering again, not because the words hurt, because they described exactly what she had lived through. She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I'm sorry. For what? I seem to cry every time you're around lately. His expression softened. I don't think you're crying because I'm here. I think you're crying because you finally don't have to pretend you're fine. The words broke something inside her. Not painfully, gently, like a knot that had been pulled too tightly for too many years, finally coming undone. She looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Why? Vincent held her gaze. Why what? Why do you keep protecting me? She expected a practical answer. Because you're an employee. Because it's company policy. Because Ethan crossed a line. Instead, Vincent answered with complete honesty. Because every time someone tried to make you feel small, you worked even harder instead of becoming cruel. Claire stared at him. I've spent my life surrounded by powerful people. He continued quietly. People with money, influence, titles, authority. A faint smile appeared. Very few of them were as strong as you. Claire lowered her eyes. No, I've been afraid for a long time. Being afraid doesn't mean you aren't strong. It means you kept moving anyway. Another tear slipped down her cheek. This time, she didn't wipe it away. Vincent continued. You organized my life before I even realized how much I depended on you. You remembered meetings I forgot. You solved problems before they reached my desk. You made impossible days feel ordinary. His smile became almost imperceptible. And somehow, you never stopped being kind. Claire laughed through her tears. I've made plenty of mistakes. I know. You've also made this company better. She looked at him for a long moment. No one has ever described me that way. They should have. A comfortable silence settled over them again. For the first time in years, Claire looked at her reflection in the ballroom window. The bruise on her cheek had nearly faded. The woman staring back at her hadn't changed. She was still curvy, still imperfect, still herself. The difference wasn't her appearance. It was what she believed when she looked at it. She smiled quietly. I think. Vincent waited. I finally understand. What? Strength. She laughed softly. It has nothing to do with looking perfect. Vincent's answering smile was warmer than any she had ever seen. No, it never did. Above them, the city lights continued to shine. And for the first time since leaving Ethan, Claire Dawson felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. Several months passed. Romano Global looked much the same from the outside. The glass tower still overlooked downtown Chicago. Board meetings still began exactly on time. Investors still praised the company's remarkable efficiency. But inside the organization, something important had changed. Claire Dawson had accepted her new position as Vice President of Executive Operations with the same quiet humility she had shown as an executive secretary. The title was different. Her character wasn't. One of her first initiatives wasn't a financial project or an operational reform. It was a people policy. Working alongside human resources, Claire introduced new workplace protections for every employee, clear reporting procedures, confidential support services, mandatory leadership training on harassment and emotional abuse. No one would ever again have to wonder whether speaking up would cost them a career. When the proposal reached Vincent's desk, he approved it without changing a single word. Months later, the annual shareholders' meeting filled Romano Global's largest auditorium. Following another year of record growth, reporters gathered near the stage as executives answered questions about expansion, investments, and future plans. Near the end of the conference, one journalist raised a hand. "Mr. Romano." Vincent nodded. "What made Claire Dawson different from every other executive you've worked with?" The room grew quiet. Claire, seated a few chairs away, looked down with a shy smile. Vincent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward her. There was unmistakable warmth in his eyes now. Not hidden, not uncertain. Simply honest. Finally, he spoke. "She organized my business for years." A gentle smile crossed his face. Without realizing it, she was also quietly putting my heart back together. The room fell silent, not because anyone was surprised, but because everyone suddenly understood what had been growing between them all along. Claire looked at Vincent, her eyes glistening once again. This time, there were no bruises to hide, no cruel words echoing in her mind, no fear waiting outside the office doors, only peace. Slowly, she reached across the space between them. Her fingers found his. Vincent intertwined his hand with hers naturally, as though it had always belonged there. Camera flashes illuminated the stage. Neither of them let go. Years earlier, Claire had believed she needed to become someone else before she deserved to be loved. Now she finally understood the truth. The right person had never asked her to change. He had simply seen her exactly as she was, and believed she had been extraordinary all along.